Back now on Triad Today. It's always a pleasure to welcome back this special guest to us, and she has brought a guest with her too. JPAR Director, we see seated next to me my good friend Sheila Jones, who's Director of Marketing for Mountain Valley Hospice and Palliative Care. And Sheila has brought with her Jane Surratt, Assistant Director for Volunteer Services at Mountain Valley. Ladies, how you doing?
Doing great.
Great,
Thanks for driving down to be with us. The reason I called, because I heard through the grapevine that you've been making an appeal for volunteers lately. We all know that they're great volunteers at hospice. But why the call out lately for volunteers? Why the need, Sheila?
Well, our census is growing larger. The footprint that we cover, the areas that we cover, in the more rural areas, we're needing volunteers to help us meet the needs of the patients and families that we're serving.
Because some hospices will serve limited geographical areas. So if you're going to volunteer, you might be in the neighborhood, but you're all over. You're Surrey and Elkin and into Virginia, right? Even in some of those areas.
And we would like to have volunteers that are in those areas versus having a volunteer from this area drive 50 miles to that area.
Exactly.
Yes.
And you were on some of the local TV stations that are our competitors and had some good interviews, and I understand you've been getting some good response from that. So
we have gotten lots of positive response.
We'll try to help with that. What are you looking for in a volunteer? Jane, why don't you take that?
We'd love to have someone who's very compassionate, very willing to help. You don't have to have a whole lot of time available to be a volunteer. We want your heart to be in it.
Yeah.
And you really need to love people and be able to deal with a lot of different situations.
Yeah, now that brings me to this. What are some of the jobs that, if I'm sitting here watching this interview, I think, okay, now I've got to be, I like people, and okay, but what am I going to be asked to do? What are some of the jobs you do?
That our volunteers do.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we have patient-family volunteers, which is something we need desperately. We always need those. But if you don't want to work directly with patients or their families, we have administrative jobs that we need for people to do. We have volunteer jobs in the marketing department, helping Sheila. We try to focus on what your qualities are and what you like to do.
Everybody brings different skills to the volunteer table.
You may have something that we don't realize we need.
Now, Sheila, if somebody calls up and says, hey, I want to be a volunteer in such and such area, in Elkin or in Mount Airy, whatever, they don't just walk in and become a volunteer. I mean, there's some training involved, right?
Yes, there is some training. We put them through about 15 to 16 hours of training, and that can be done in a classroom setting or it can be done one-on-one. I think one of our other volunteer coordinators calls it volunteer training to go.
Right.
Or volunteer training in a box, maybe.
Right.
And then some of the things that we like to have ahead of time is a clean criminal background check, and there's an interview process. So it doesn't cost anything to be a part of that. It's just that we like for you to register so we can go ahead and get some things started and get you signed up.
And that takes time and effort, and I know you've done some fundraisers to cover that cost. Does that mean that I would not have to pay a fee to be trained?
Correct.
So it's free to be trained.
It is free to be trained.
There's no right or wrong answer to this question. I'm going to ask both of you. You can jump in however you want to. Maybe start with Jane, and that is, how do volunteers benefit from helping patients, and how do patients benefit from the volunteers? It's sort of a two-prong, it's a flip of the coin thing.
Yeah. With patient-family volunteers, they provide a much-needed service to our families and their patients when they provide respite, which is just going into a home and being there so the caregiver can get out for just a couple of hours.
Right.
As far as the volunteer being able to get something out of that, I think in a lot of situations the volunteers probably get more out of what they're doing than the patient.
You're shaking your head. You agree with this. What did you want to say?
Well, I agree with it. I do find that with the volunteers that I've worked with in the past or even currently, that they will come and tell you, I receive way more than I give. And like she said, when someone's sick and in the home, they're sick in that home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That caregiver is stuck to that patient 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A volunteer coming in just for a couple of hours so that person can run to the drugstore and run a few errands gives them a little bit of relief.
Makes a big difference.
And you don't have to have a medical knowledge, just be someone who's willing to sit and have a conversation.
And those of us that have had personal experience with hospice care and with our families know how important these volunteers are, so I urge everybody to get involved. Here's the website, www.mtn, which of course stands for Mountain Valley Hospice.org. It's up on screen. You can see it. Also a shout out to Scott Bauer and the good folks at Southern Community Bank that make this kind of segment possible. Their website is www.smallenought2care.com. They are small enough to care. They care about everything and everybody, seriously, and this is one of the things they care about. So, to Sheila and Jane, thanks for being here.
Thank you.